You start by exploring a game. It's small, boxy corridors, empty rooms, a Counter-Strike map repurposed into something quieter. And there's a voice guiding you through it, warm, familiar, a little nostalgic. He tells you his name is Davy. He tells you he's about to show you something personal. Years of half-finished games made by a friend of his, a private, reclusive developer named Coda. Nobody else has ever seen these. You're being let in on a secret. Davy's pitch is simple, almost sweet. He says we're going to use these games to figure out who Coda really is. Not critique them as games, use them like a diary. Every strange design choice, every empty room, every dead end is a clue about a real person's inner life. It sounds like an act of love. Someone paying close, devoted attention to a friend's work. The way you'd pore over old letters trying to understand someone you'd lost touch with. And for a while, it plays like that. You move through prototype after prototype. A prison level. A maze. A house with hidden corridors you're not meant to find right away. While Davy narrates his interpretations warmly, thoughtfully, like a curator, walking you through a gallery of someone else's soul. He points out a level that feels like a dull interior concealing a rich interior, and explains that Coda's tools were always the same, boxy, linear corridors because that's what the engine has always been used for. Big, flat, empty rooms. Davy says it almost affectionately, the way you'd describe a friend's handwriting. He talks about how Coda's games got sadder over time, lonelier. The early ones are curious, playful, full of little puzzles and half-formed ideas. But somewhere in the timeline, the tone shifts. The rooms get bigger and emptier. The messages get more withdrawn. And Davy starts worrying out loud about his friend's mental state, the way you'd worry about someone who stopped returning your texts as often as they used to. But something's a little off, and it creeps in slowly enough that you might not clock it at first. There's a level where you're supposed to sit locked in a prison cell for a full, real hour. A design choice Coda clearly made on purpose, forcing the player to sit with confinement instead of just looking for a metaphor. Davy skips it, just cuts right past it, apologizing, saying it's not that interesting. That you don't need to experience the whole thing to get the point. He does this more than once. He speeds sections up, he adds things that weren't there, and that's where the trust starts to crack. Level after level, a lamppost appears at the very end, a small recurring symbol. Davy tells you, confidently, that this is Coda's marker, something he places to signal a finished project, a destination reached. It becomes a running thread in his commentary, a piece of evidence he keeps building his theory of Coda on top of. Except it isn't true. Much later you learn from Coda himself that Davy put those lampposts there, all of them. He'd been quietly attributing his own additions to his friend's intentions for a large stretch of the story, and telling you the whole time how transparent he was being with you. He also mentions once that he and Coda used to argue about this exact kind of thing. Davy believed that if you put real effort into a game, it deserves to be playable, accessible, finished. Coda apparently disagreed. Coda seemed to want his games left exactly as strange and difficult and unresolved as he made them. Davy never really let that disagreement go. You can feel it in every edit he makes. And then you reach the last game Coda ever sent him, something called Tower. Cold and difficult, clearly made under some kind of strain. All sharp angles and dead ends, and a mood that feels less like sadness now and more like exhaustion. And carved into its walls there are messages. Not for the player, for Davy. Coda is done. Coda doesn't want him showing these games to anyone else ever again. Coda wants to be left alone. The tone isn't ambiguous, it isn't a puzzle to interpret, it's about as direct as a person can be. Davy shows it to you anyway. Here's where it stops being a story about friendship and starts being something harder to sit with. Because the more you learn, the more it starts to look like nobody's ever verified Coda exists in the first place. No one else has seen his work. No one else has met him. Every single thing you know about this supposedly separate, private person came from Davy. The same Davy who's already shown you repeatedly on camera that he'll rewrite someone else's work and misattribute his own additions to fit the story he wants to tell about them. Which means the entire framing. Let's understand who Coda is through his art. Might be the exact violation the story is actually about. Using someone's private work as a window into their soul, whether or not they ever agreed to that, whether or not they even exist as a separate person at all. And if Coda isn't real, if this is Davy processing something about his own creative life through an invented absent friend, then the moral of the story didn't stop him from committing the same act one more time. He took something private, made it public, dressed it up as an apology, and shipped it to you and to everyone who plays this. Near the very end, the narration starts to break down. Davy admits, almost as an aside, almost too late, like it's slipping out rather than being confessed, that maybe the real reason he showed anyone these games at all wasn't concern for his friend. Maybe it was that he needed people to tell him his interpretation mattered, that he needed an audience to witness him understanding something profound, even if the thing he understood was never really there to begin with, even if the whole architecture of insight he built was constructed entirely by him, alone, and simply misattributed to somebody else so it would feel more like discovery and less like invention. Then he just stops talking, excuses himself mid-sentence, saying it's become too much to keep recording, leaves you alone to finish the level by yourself in silence, walking through the last space without a voice explaining what any of it means for the first time in the entire experience. Which is notably the same thing Coda apparently wanted the whole time. To be left alone with his own work, uninterrupted, unexplained, unowned by anyone else's narration. You never do find out for certain who was telling the truth, whether Coda was ever real, whether any of what you just watched actually happened, or whether it was always fiction, wearing the clothes of confession. That's not an accident, and it's not a cop-out either. The game isn't interested in giving you a clean answer about what really happened between these two people, because the moment you start treating a person's work as a puzzle to be solved, as evidence to be assembled into a theory of who they secretly are, you've already stopped listening to what they were actually trying to say. That's the trap the whole game sets for you, quietly the entire time. It invites you to play detective with someone else's soul. And by the time the narration walks away and leaves you standing there in the dark, you realize you've been doing exactly what Davy did, interpreting, assembling, deciding what it all means. Nobody ever asked you to. If this one resonated, subscribe. New essays drop weekly, and you never know what's coming next. Share it with someone who'd get it, and leave a comment. I want to know which door this opened for you. Mystery Compendium. The archive is always open.